Welcome to Pivotal Moments HQ. On this podcast, we share guidance and tips on how you can live an empowered life.
Every choice you make is a pivotal moment and serves as a catalyst to living with intention, purpose, and meaning.
It's never too late to start living your life and your right on time. I'm Siria, a mindset coach, attorney, and mental health advocate.
I'm Melissa Robeda, a world leader in appreciative inquiry and strength-based leadership. This is Pivotal Moments HQ.
May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it is very important to me personally, and I think Melissa as well, to bring awareness to mental health, specifically to lessen the stigma. And that's why I hold myself out as a mental health advocate, and I just think it's really important for us to really just take a moment to talk about what is mental health, why is this important for us, and really just highlight that, because it's going to help us increase our well-being, and more people than you think are being impacted with mental health.
I'm really glad that we're actually recording this episode, because I know personally that I've experienced some stigma around mental health, particularly in my family. I know that I make it known here that I go to therapy. I'm a huge advocate for seeking out professional help, building support systems, but that was not well received within my family, particularly my father, which should probably surprise no one. But there are different stigmas that one can experience, and awareness helps demystify or remove some of these stigmas. And so there's 3 different types of stigmas. You have the public stigma, kind of what I was talking about. My father, there's these negative attitudes that they have about mental illness. My father, he's quasi-religious. And so, he's like, well, why is it that you go? You've been going. Like, are you not healed by now? First of all, I want to be like, I should really be billing you, or you should really be reimbursing me for the amount of money that I've spent in therapy, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, so that's public stigma. Then you have self-stigma, which is the negative attitudes that we hold. So, we might internalize shame. We might think of ourselves as a failure, like my brain is faulty, like I'm just this huge disappointment. So it's the narrative that you're telling yourself. And then the last stigma is institutional stigma. And this is more systemic, and it involves policies and legislation that governmental agencies and private organizations, i.e. insurance companies, that intentionally or unintentionally limit your opportunities to receive mental health treatment or care.
I mean, I think it's great that we started with the stigmas, so that way you guys can see, hey, here's what it is. But what is actually mental health? And so according to the Department of Health and Human Services, mental health is defined as including our emotions, let me back up. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, mental health is defined as including our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is very important at every stage of life, from early childhood through adolescence through adulthood. And so really, when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about this thing that we think is outside of us, but really impacts every single aspect of our lives, which is why it is so important that we have these conversations, that we understand what are the stigmas, and I would say even what are the early warning signs that, hey, maybe you need to spend a little bit more time in this area of your life.
Well, I think when I was putting together my show notes, when we're talking about mental health, I think helps with mental illness. And I think, even that term in and of itself, when I think of mental illness, or even when you think about mental illness, what image, what comes to mind, what feeling? To me, I picture someone with severe schizophrenia that is dangerous. I'm perpetuating the stigma.
Well, and that's why I think that I purposefully didn't use the word mental health or mental illness, because when I think of mental illness, I'm thinking of the DSM-5, and I'm thinking of a diagnosis that a psychologist would make and say, yeah, you have all of these things. We need to put you on medication. We need to put you behind bars or, a padded room or whatever. We need to do these things because you have this illness. Mental health awareness, though, is so much broader than having a diagnosis. Everybody will experience depression.
Well, and that's what I was going to get to, which is like there's actually, you have mental illness, but then you also have mental conditions or disorders, right? And so the two most common health conditions that we see is anxiety disorders. This can include PTSD, OCD, panic attacks, just general anxiety. And then you have mood disorders. So if you've ever suffered from depression or if you're bipolar, these are actually quite common. And according to the CDC, in the United States alone, more than 50% of people will be diagnosed with a mental illness or disorder at some point in their lives. And 1 in 5 Americans will experience a mental illness or disorder this year.
And that's the crazy part for me. It's like 1 in 5. 1 in 5 people is going to have some sort of issue with mental health. And I think it was 1 in 6 young people experience a major depressive episode at some point. And 1 in 20 Americans lives with a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disease, or major depression. So, when we're talking about this, it isn't just, oh, this is a small group of people, it doesn't impact me. That's bullshit. It does impact you, because you are going to know someone, in our squad that we call, we're 5 people, right? That means that one of us is always dealing with it, and it's not always me.
I was gonna volunteer as tribute. That'll be me.
All of us have that, but all of this also comes to, suicide is one of the leading causes of death in the United States. And in fact, it's the second leading cause of death for people between the ages of 10 and 24. And in 2020, it took over 45,000 Americans' lives. Like, this is serious. And that's nearly double the amount of people lost to homicide.
I know. I came across that statistic and it just made me so sad. It made me so sad. And I think that the reason why even just having an episode like this where we're talking about it is because there was actually a study done in 2016 based on stigma that concluded there is no country, society, or culture where people with mental illness or disorders have the same societal value as people without. And I think that we just need to be able to break that, because it's so common and so prevalent. And I feel like just, talking about it and normalizing it, why we are all of equal value. We are all of equal value. And I think that's just so important to highlight.
I absolutely believe that it is. So there's some early warning signs that the World Health Organization has put out. And I kind of wanted to walk through those, because I can tell you, I went ahead and starred the ones that I feel like, oh, these are signs that I have when I'm starting to have maybe issues. And then, and this is not to say that I don't have issues right now, because I'm still coming out of some existential depression, according to my therapist. Thank you very much for fucking with me. Anyways, it's another story for another day. But I wanted to point these out to you guys, because sometimes we think, oh, well, it looks like somebody binging ice cream, not wanting to do anything, and that is the sign of depression. There's so much more nuance to all of this. So just going through the list. Here are some early warning signs that someone may be experiencing some mental health problems, and for you to just be on the lookout, either in yourself or those around you. Eating or sleeping too much or too little, pulling away from people and usual activities, having low or no energy, feeling numb, like nothing matters, having unexplained aches or pains, feeling helpless or hopeless, smoking, drinking, and using drugs more than usual, feeling unusually confused, forgetful, on edge, angry, upset, worried, or scared, yelling or fighting with your family and friends, experiencing severe mood swings that cause problems in relationships, having persistent thoughts and memories you can't get out of your head, hearing voices or believing things that are not true, thinking of harming yourself or others, or the inability to perform daily tasks like taking care of your kids or getting to work or school.
Now, most of these on the list, like at first I was kind of smiling because I'm like, okay, lack of sleep, everything hurts. I'm like, okay, well, I'm getting old and like all this stuff, right? So I feel some listeners out there might be like, okay, that's just normal, right? At what point do these symptoms maybe are concerning? Is it if it's like for prolonged periods of time? Is it just like a person's like, you know what, I've been feeling real shitty for a very long time. Like, I need to go get help. Or I've been to the doctor and they can't find anything that's wrong with me.
I mean, this is a good time for us to point out we're not psychologists. And so this is based on our experience. But what I would say is when you start seeing the compounding of some of these things, if it's just, okay, one day I didn't get enough sleep and I'm sleeping too much, okay, you're going to be able to relate that. But if you start seeing a pattern of things, and in order for a pattern to emerge, it's got to happen at least 3 times, right? And so if you start, I have low energy, I'm sleeping a lot, I just don't find the same joy that I did from the things that I had before. These are things that could be a signal to you of, hey, maybe I need to do something and take a look at this. Because if there's something wrong with your car, what do? You take it to the mechanic, right? If you fall down and you break a bone, if you don't set it properly, you may lose function of that body part if you don't go to the doctors, right? So there are things that we do. Taking care of your mental health isn't any different. So it's good to just sometimes get a check and just see, hey, is everything going well for me? Because everybody's baseline is a little bit different. And so you just need to be able to recognize, and you'll recognize around you, hey, their baseline is off. And I think sometimes just being able to say, hey, you know what, I just kind of noticed that you haven't been eating as much, not necessarily commenting on their weight, but just, hey, I just noticed this change in you. What's going on? And I think being there for people can give them that opportunity to say, oh yeah, there is something.
And oftentimes we know when something's wrong. So I have a sibling who is contemplating going into therapy and has been saying that they were going to be going into therapy for years now. And I know that there's some underlying issue. And then they just recently told me like, okay, but like now it's time to go. But it's expensive. And I think it's easy to, and it is, I feel like, mental health is, I shouldn't say for the wealthy, but I mean, it does. I mean, there are free, resources out there and you can hunt for them. But what I was telling this particular sibling is, yes, it can be pricey. Unfortunately, insurances either don't cover it or they cover X amount for the year. But, even though you might want to go quite regularly, there was a point in time where I was going at least once a week to my therapist because I was dealing with some intense feelings and emotions. But you don't have to. Like, you can start off small. Like, if you're just trying to dip your toe into therapy, go once a month and see how that feels. And I also just want to point out that there have been instances where I have met with a counselor and that person just like, I knew that person, the way that they approach situations, the way they talk with me, it wasn't going to resonate with me. So, you are worth so much and your mental health is priceless. And if you just feel like you're not jiving with this person, find someone else because you're worth it.
Absolutely, you are worth it. And it is a little bit like dating, and it may take some time for you to find the right fit. But I think with even that, sibling wanting to go and the cost that is associated with it, which I do think is something that we talk about a lot or associate with at least being able to get therapy. I heard the statistic. I wish I could remember where I heard it. It's something like only like 10% of people are actually going to a therapist. So, we are in that 10%. We're giving you this information. These are free resources, and you take and you will take what works for you and what doesn't work for you as you continue forward. But I think the bigger thing is people think, oh, I should only go to mental health when I'm feeling bad, when things are going wrong. That might have been the trigger for both of us to initially seek out therapy. I know it certainly was for me. But prevention actually helps you get there. So if you're in a good spot and you're like, hey, things are going pretty well, it's actually a great time for you to explore maybe some of the issues, or at least start building that network of support for yourself that will help you in the future, because they've shown that prevention actually really does help, and insurance companies should get behind it because it improves everybody's well-being. It improves higher overall productivity, better educational outcomes. It can actually lower crime rates, produce stronger economies, lowers healthcare costs. You have an improved quality of life, increased lifespan, and improved family life.
I mean, we did a whole episode on how stress alone impacts the various systems within our body. So you would think that insurance companies, because you're right, if your mental health and physical health are so interconnected and equally important components to our overall health. So if you're neglecting one, it's going to impact the other. So you would think as preventative care that insurances would be like, yeah, you should go.
And I think they're going to get there. I think they're going
I
to get
hope
there
so.
little by little, and making sure that it isn't just, hey, you need to be institutionalized, we'll pay for it at this point. It's like, no, there are things that we could do beforehand to make sure that people are doing well. Because according to the WHO, there are 4 dimensions of health, and there's physical, mental, social, and spiritual health. And so those are the areas that you would want to make sure are being covered. And so insurance companies, what are you doing? Make sure you're paying for something on all of these things and really helping people, which I think really brings us to what are some of the suggestions that we have to help improve your mental health?
So I know we talked about counseling. Counseling has been a big game changer for me. I am a huge proponent of it because it helps challenge negative thoughts. Because I feel like for myself, if I'm not going to push myself to an uncomfortable spot. Whereas my counselor, I know that I've talked about and joked about her on the show before because she asks some hard, tough questions, and she'll be like, do I have permission to hurt you now? And I'm like, well, thank you for that emotional consent. Yes, you may. And then she'll ask the really tough question. And it definitely pushes me further than I would have pushed myself because I know that you don't have to, you can still grow and nurture yourself. There's a lot of self-help books and resources out there that you can do. But for me, I definitely needed a counselor to push me beyond my comfort zone.
Yes, I think for me, yes, the having a counselor as part of my toolbox of mental health tools has definitely been helpful. And I think the most I've gone in recent years without going was I was in maintenance for probably a good 6 months. And it was nice because I could lean on other tools and other things that I have. But I'm going to keep it pretty simple because I think that there are some things with our mental health that sometimes we try to overcomplicate things. Drink water. Drink some water. And I know Melissa's giving me this look like really, I just want to drink all the coffee. You know what? We are made of water. Do something that will help nourish you. Drink some water. This is actually a great way to just kind of give yourself a little break, reset, get yourself some H2O is going to be my first tip.
So I was telling City even before we started recording this episode that I had a really hard time building show notes for this because when we're talking about mental health tips, there's going to be things that work for me that aren't going to work for you, that aren't going to work for Cydia. And so what we're sharing right now are just things that have worked for us. And so that's why I mentioned counseling. And, I know we've also talked about being outside and exercising. And I think that those just do do wonderful things. I feel like as I was reflecting on this, I would say for me personally, it's practicing self-compassion. I know that I've shared on the show different stumbling blocks or obstacles or learning moments. For example, the boundaries that I try to set with my mother, again, had every good intention. And then I yelled at her. And I was mad at myself for not having responded the way that I had wanted to. But I had to give myself self-compassion and a little bit of grace that, I am working towards being more patient, building a relationship with my mother, learning how to set a healthy boundary and how to communicate that properly. So, it may not go the way that you want it to go, but just know that one, you have that self-awareness piece built in and that you're using this as a learning opportunity. Because I think what I've found in my work with, counseling and stuff like that, it's not even necessarily learning new tips. It's also unlearning a lot of the defense mechanisms that we've put up in place to protect ourselves. I think a lot of my work in therapy has been unlearning shit more than it is learning stuff.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that. And I think that with the added item I would put to the self-compassion is say what you're thinking and feeling out loud, even if it's just to yourself. Because I think sometimes just being able to say it and hear yourself say it, there's going to be a part of you that's going to be like, that's some bullshit, Melissa. Like, you're trying. I'm trying. Yeah, I didn't show up how I wanted to with my mom, but you know what? it's not as bad as it is. And so sometimes just saying those things, I know I've certainly done it with myself where I've said some of the things that I have out loud, and I've been kind of playing around with Matt on this. I'll be like, well, this is what went through my head, and he'll be like, that's really mean. I'm like, I know, I'm just telling you like what is going on in my head. And then I can acknowledge like, yeah, that's a mean thing. And but I'm saying it to myself. It wasn't like I'm telling you this mean thing about you. It's this is what I thought about myself in this moment. And it's like, well, that's ridiculous. Like you're not, whatever. I can't think of the most recent example of me being a bitch to myself, but I can tell you that it was not an act of self-compassion, but saying it out loud minimized that, bitchiness.
Well, and one of the things that I had to unlearn was basically challenging the narrative that I tell myself. I think Siria does an excellent job of telling me like, does that story serve you right now? No, it doesn't, bitch. But let me just tell it this way, okay? Because it's easier for me to live into that narrative than it is to create a new one. And I think when you create the new one, you can start to live into that new narrative, and it also does bring out self-compassion as a byproduct, which is nice.
Yes, it is. The next thing that I would recommend is moving. And I'm not saying like move
I was
your house.
I was like, I had daddy issues. I'm moving away from him.
Yeah,
bye.
Move away, get far away, burn.
That's exactly what I
down.
thought. That's exactly
no. I'm saying like literally move your body. And I'm not talking about necessarily exercise, but like I found that one of the biggest things for me, especially when I was working in the high-paced environments of these law firms and just feeling really overwhelmed, is I would grab my headphones and I would go for a walk for 5-10 minutes, just enough to move my body and get me out of this space. If like looking at my laptop for 7-8 hours straight was driving me insane, I needed to go look at something else, just get out of that environment for enough time to just let me know, hey, things are okay. Whether it was going outside, taking that break to, at that point, probably grab my third or fourth cup of coffee for the day, all of those other things, but just moving, even if you feel like I can't do a whole lot, just shake up your body, do something to physically move. And I found that always helps me reset.
Well, the last one I got is, I've said this in several different episodes. I love being outside. There is just something about being outside when you kind of realize how small you are, like just a small cog in like, that the things that are the universe. It really then kind of puts your problems or your emotions kind of into perspective, at least for me.
I definitely agree with that. I think there's so much power in being in nature and being in the sun. I recently went to Florida, and my sister-in-law and the baby unfortunately suffer from eczema. And babies usually get baby eczema, but like this is a genetic condition. And so we spent a lot of time inside, and it was not awesome for someone like me who needs to spend more time outside. And so I finally took myself to the beach, and it was amazing because I knew what I needed for myself in that space. But the last thing that I'll add is more of a try not to do. And I know a lot of you are going back into an office of some kind, but a lot of you are also still maybe being remote or doing some sort of hybrid model. Avoid commingling your spaces. So like your bed is for sleep and for sex. Okay. That's it. It's not for watching TV. It's not for doing all of your things on there. Like it confuses your body. Same thing. If like your workspace is your workspace, don't make it your play space. Like try to keep those things relaxed and separate, because your body gets into your body and your mind will pick up the cues of this space, like, oh, this is the space where we do work. And so then it'll get into a work mode. But if you've now confused it with work and play and all these other things, it's very hard for you to start fighting against those habits and those habit loops that you've created when you commingle your spaces.
I'm sorry. How does anybody commingle workspace with play space? I'm looking around in my office, which is where we record, and I was like, this is not a place for fun. This is a place for work. I don't know how you do it, but if you can manage to make your work space also your fun space, more power to you. I know you say not to, but I'm impressed.
I mean, it would be a matter of not having that separation. Like I just noticed that, there's a particular space that I have for coaching. That's where I coach. And there's another space where I like to read. That's where I like to read, and just keeping those really separate. Because as soon as I start, watching my Netflix shows there or spending time on social media there, then it gets confused. It's like, well, what is this space for? And so avoiding commingling. But yeah, I don't know how you would combine the two other than not getting out of your office.
I'm feeling personally attacked right now. But so the whole purpose of this podcast is we share tips and tricks in terms of like how to live a more authentic, life. And I feel that by embracing mental health and finding ways to improve it can help you or help empower you to not only heal, but to also become your more authentic self.
Yes. Be you, boo-boo. Be you.
That's it for this episode. Find Pivotal Moments HQ on Instagram and TikTok for all the BTS and sister-like banter you know and love. We want to thank our music director, Ron Johnson. This has been a Pug Productions podcast.